Wednesday night, the governor reimposed the 10-person limit on household gatherings and a ban on service at bars that get 70% of their revenue from alcohol. That's in northern lower Michigan and the upper peninsula. And so they had advanced to the next phase of reopening, and now they've taken a bit of a step back there. And a 50-person limit on indoor social gatherings that have been in place since June 10th. Now, we turn to Tony Daunt, the executive director of the Michigan Freedom Fund, to help navigate all this. And one of the questions we got from Harbor Springs this morning from a listener there was, since it's a limit of 10 on gatherings, does that include churches? I don't know if you know. I don't.
I don't. And I think if anybody was able to interpret what the governor's been doing over the last 5 months in any kind of way that makes sense, they'd be a pretty wealthy person, because I think there'd be a pretty high demand for kind of a Whitmer whisperer in terms of what it is she's saying and what her plans are. There is just no consistency, nothing outside of just kind of arbitrary what her feelings of the moment are behind these decisions. She refuses to give any real data as to what it means, what she's looking for in order to lift these restrictions, what it's taking to put some on, add them back in like she did on Wednesday. Other than that, we've got a spike, or things are getting higher, or they're creeping up, or they're coming down a little bit. It's maddening. And I understand people being confused and frustrated, because I am as well, and everybody I talk to is.
You remember Patrick Colbeck. He ran for governor, was a state legislator, and he thinks the governor ought to be impeached because he says there's zero science behind the orders except for political science. And he wants one representative to introduce a resolution to get the ball rolling. And the House Speaker didn't go so far as to say she should be impeached, but he did echo, according to MERS News, the political science part of it.
Yeah, and that's a great way of putting it, is for all the talk about data and science and the information behind the decisions. It is just political science, and there has been nothing offered by this governor or her administration that points to consistency in the decisions being made. I mean, the cynic in me and in others could say, well, of course, they needed to move things back up in northern Michigan, because a lot of those areas are moving towards the idea of getting kids back in the classroom full time. And so if we can make it seem like, if they can make it seem like things are spiking, well, then that would seem irresponsible. And of course, those who aren't, they're already making announcements to start digital in a lot of places down here, at least in lower Michigan. My daughter's school here in DeWitt got an email about that yesterday, that's kind of their plan. Again, the science and the data thus far from places that have remained, daycares that have remained open, or schools in other countries and other areas that have remained open or reopened, it's not providing the spike. It's not impacting children negatively. And of course, there are teachers and staff who may be, if they're exposed, they have other health problems. We should take steps to mitigate that. But this just blanket kind of panic shutdown is so unhealthy and so dangerous, and it just helps the governor keep up with her unilateral powers, and I think that's really the only thing she's interested in.
Some people would say she's trying to keep us safe and keep us from dying. Do you think there is some ulterior motive?
Unfortunately, I do. And I think that, again, going back to the beginning of this, there was a lot of goodwill provided to this governor, with the understanding that I think everybody wanted to keep people safe, keep them healthy, keep things from spiraling out of control. But it was abused within the first month and has remained to be abused since then. And it's this governor's style. We've seen it throughout her tenure in office, with her budget shenanigans from last year, with her resistance to signing auto insurance reform, and with her insistence that 45-cent per gallon gas tax increase was the only way to fix the roads. And she's been met with opposite policy prescriptions that go against that, and rather than engage them, she just pushes back and my way or the highway. And it's unfortunate, and it's really led to an ugly situation in Lansing.
One of the heartbreaking complaints I keep hearing is how people can't visit their own relatives in assisted living facilities. I don't even know how that can exist in a free society. They can't even take them out into the courtyard or something, and be like being imprisoned in those facilities, and then come to find out that COVID patients were sent in, but relatives aren't. And what about the workers? I mean, the healthcare workers, they go back and forth. That doesn't make sense to me.
You and me both, MPS. And again, that's another one of those things where, for all the talk about data and science, what we're left with is a lack of data and policies that fly in the face of the science. That was one of the few things we knew at the outset, was that the elderly and the infirm are going to be the most impacted by this. And so we had a policy, the governor had a policy where they were mandated to accept people with COVID. And basically it's like lighting a match in a dry field and throwing it and walking away. It's absurd. And we still don't have information on other long-term care facilities, how many people have been infected and died there. There's no comprehensive count of that, which, again, the cynic, the skeptic, tells me that it's probably because it's a large number and it's bad info and they don't want to share it. And again, you've got that, as you pointed out, and yet people can't go visit. It just makes no sense. And it is one of those things that just calls into question the priorities and the motives of this governor. And she continues to show that it's her way or the highway, even when it's a life or death situation. And that's really unfortunate.
Do you think that, and this is quite a cynical question, that once Joe Biden has chosen his running mate, if it's not Governor Whitmer, that the policies might change some?
It's a cynical question, but you're not the first to ask it. And people in my life, people, family, and friends who are apolitical, who don't pay attention to politics all that much, they've said, "Well, don't worry. When Trump loses in November, this virus will go away and we can go back to normal." And I hate thinking like that. It's pretty wild to me that people who don't pay attention to politics are thinking like that, because it tells me that they're kind of seeing through some of the hysteria and the panic. And it just goes to show that we lack real clear leadership from people in charge in this country, and that whether that's the president or this governor or healthcare officials who tell you one thing in March and then insist that you need to do the opposite thing in June and in July. And
yeah, Dr. Fauci was talking about eye coverings yesterday now and goggles and so forth, and I don't know what to think. That's why we turned to Tony Daunt, Executive Director, Michigan Freedom Fund. It's Michael Patrick.